per month. While I support this goal, as 155s have proven their value in wartime, I worry about the sustainment of production capacity once the demand and requirements for this munition decreases. We've seen this happen time and time again in the past, where we've been on this roller coaster ride where we rebuild weapons stockpiles, our batteries are then able to fire at will, and our magazines are full, but then we find ourselves in the same predicament again. So the question is how do we sustain this production? It's imperative that the Army responsibly invest in industry partners in production facilities looking at the long term. And I'm eager to hear from the witnesses on the progress of the many modernization projects across the OIB. Most Army ammunition plants and arsenals have technology and processes from World War II. With supplemental dollars in a 15-year modernization strategy with plans to invest roughly $18 billion across the organic industrial base, I'm optimistic about the Army's efforts to update production technology and facilities. With improved production lines boasting flexibility and advanced manufacturing, the OIB will be better positioned for production surges. We must ensure that the billions of dollars we have invested are appropriately spent across facilities. The modernization of energetics is another key issue within the organic industrial base. Novel energetics can and will increase lethality and range for ordnance, propulsion, and weapon systems, giving the warfighter a greater edge in future fights and ensuring that our technology remains bound in technology that puts us ahead of our adversaries. Through industry and academic institutions, we are currently developing improved energetic materials. The Department is still primarily using the same energetic materials from World War II. The historic lack of central management and strategy across the services has delayed the progress of novel energetic integration into weapon systems. I am pleased that finally, after last year's hearing, the Joint Energetic Transition Office has been established 2 years after it was enabled in the National Defense Authorization Act. This office will be a key to creating central leadership and advancing energetic innovation and integration, allowing us to catch up with our adversaries both in range and lethality. And I'm looking forward to seeing the work they do across the organic industrial base. Today's hearing will explore the many challenges the organic industrial base encounters, including access to a domestic supply chain, antiquated manufacturing processes, and fluctuating requirements. We will also explore the Army's efforts to scale munition production capacity to ensure safety standards for service members and civilians working in the production process are met. And we want to make sure we're investing, too, in emerging technologies and new facilities to modernize the organic industrial base. With that, I'd like to introduce our witnesses and then turn to our ranking member. Our witnesses today are the Honorable Brent Ingraham, Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Sustainment, and Technology, Lieutenant General Chris Mohan, Commanding General, Army Materiel Command, Major General John Reim, Joint Program Executive Officer, Armaments and Ammunition, and Commanding General of Picatinny Arsenal. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today, and I turn to my friend and ranking member, Mr. Norcross, for his opening statements.
Thank you, Chairman, and I want to thank the witnesses for their time today. Look forward to this discussion. Chairman Whitman Bergman, thank you for holding this joint hearing on such an important topic, the modernization of Army's portion of our organic industrial base. Our ammunition plants, arsenals, and depots play a critical role in providing capability and capacity to meet the requirements of the combatant commanders. These facilities develop and produce the ammunitions, the munitions, and weapons that our warfighters rely on. And they repair, overhaul our combat systems. Our country could not sustain a large-scale combat operations without the support of these facilities. So very glad that we're spending today on this issue and certainly looking forward to your comments. But over the last few years, this committee, the Tactical Air and Land Forces, we paid particularly close attention to sustaining the modernization of the Army Organic Industrial Base. Anyone who has visited any of these depots, which Rob and I had, it's a time machine. Yeah. For many of them, it feels like we landed in a different century. So some of their spaces are certainly need repair, upgrades, and safety improvements, and we have a plan. It's how quickly can we get it done. So for those Americans who work in these facilities, We need to provide the best equipment, a safe work environment, because what we've seen improvements over the years, we can continue to see accidents. I acknowledge that some of this work is absolutely dangerous work, but we can and must do better. I know we will discuss the investments the Army has made to increase capacity and the capabilities of our facilities. But I'd like to hear about investments and procedural changes that the Army has made to improve safety at these facilities and drive down mishaps. I recognize the topic is squarely in the lane of our friends from the Readiness Committee, but it is a topic that I paid close attention to, and I cannot think of a better forum than this to discuss it. Second, the modernization and expansion. The war in Ukraine helped us identify shortfalls in our organic munition production facilities. In many ways, this is our own fault by historically using munition accounts as bill payers for other high priority accounts. But over the last few years, the Department and Congress have worked collaboratively to reverse the course, resulting in $1 billion of investment into our ammunition and production facilities. In some cases, these investments resulted in modernization to existing facilities. In others, we've expanded the organic industrial base by creating entirely new facilities. In a perfect world, these two types of investment would not compete with each other. However, the Army is now forecasting that we may not realize the full expanded capacity, and that instead settle for a lower sustainment rate. This creates a problem, especially with the 155 artillery rounds. We're building a new facility in Mesquite, Texas, yet short of a large-scale war, high demand from foreign partners and allies will likely never achieve the production rates that would utilize this capacity. So I ask the witnesses to address the problem in such a way that it doesn't pull work away from our existing facilities. I'll ask the witnesses today to address this concern for a coherent plan for those facilities and show that we will optimally utilize that we don't compete with each other. Lastly, I remain concerned that ourselves into a boom-bust cycle. Those sine waves that we've talked so many times before. Billions of dollars of investments over the last few years are helpful, but it added capacity, and then it would be wasted if the demand never materializes. Those sustained conflict or external demand through foreign material sales. I return to the 155 to talk about these shells, since it's such a good example. The department initially planned 100,000 rounds per month, now forecasts a much lower rate. We modernized and expanded the base to achieve that high number. And in some cases, our industry partners made internal investments to help. If we never realize this capacity, that all happens to our investments, both private and public. What happens to the facilities and the companies that hired additional workers to achieve these goals? We need to find out the sustaining rate, what will be the production we're looking for. In closing, this hearing focuses on an extremely important topic. Very much look forward to discussion and like to again thank Chairman Whitman and Bergman for holding this committee hearing.
I thank the gentleman from New Jersey, our ranking member, Mr. Norcross, and now turn to the gentleman from Michigan, the chairman of the Readiness Subcommittee, Chairman Bergman.
Thank you, Chairman Whitman. I appreciate you for recognizing me for this, and particularly pleased to be working with you, Ranking Member Garamendi, Ranking Member Norcross, on discussing Army's organic industrial base. The organic industrial base is the heart of our Army's ability to generate combat power, and any inadequacies in the industrial base directly impact the mission-capable rates of our ground forces. Unfortunately, Army's readiness trends over the last decade are particularly troubling. Since 2015, almost all Army vehicles experienced declines in mission-capable rates. Additionally, Army's maintenance costs are increasing with an average cost increase of over 50%. According to GAO, the lack of parts and challenges related to technical data negatively affected the availability and costs of the entire ground forces. These declining mission capability rates and increasing costs are directly related to an underperforming acquisition system. Our inability to adequately secure the parts and determine the technical data rights at the beginning of our acquisition process undermine the ability of our organic industrial base to adequately maintain our ground vehicle fleet. Additionally, I think that we are sitting on the precipice of a new dawn where advanced manufacturing revolutionizes our vehicle maintenance approach. I am not confident that our military is pacing with the commercial sector in delivering timely and cost-efficient products. As to the Army's organic industrial base to generate munitions capacity, our Army arsenals stand at the epicenter. I think using our arsenal's ability to assemble and build munitions necessary for our combat forces and maintain excess capacity in times of need is a good model to maintain operational readiness. I also think that the organic industrial base needs to be utilized before additional commercial options are pursued. This is why I am particularly surprised that we continue to sustain foreign munition manufacturers when idled American capacity is available to support munitions production. We need to be more realistic as to our nation's munitions goals and build capacity to meet our needs in times of conflict. At the same time, it is important that our partners and allies also retain sufficient capacity to support their needs. It is hard for me to understand why the United States should size our industrial base to meet an apathetic international consortium that has the time but lacks the will to make strategic investments to support their own national security interests. There is much we need to do to better align our industrial base for the future, and I look forward to working with the administration and our esteemed witnesses to make this a reality. I appreciate Chairman Whitman's support, and with that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from Michigan for his opening statement. Chairman Bergman, thank you. And now turn to the gentleman from California, the Ranking Member Garamendi.
Thank you, Chairman Whitman and Ranking Member Norcross, and of course, my colleague, Jack Bergman, for your partnership and leadership on issues affecting the organic industrial base, and I want to thank our witnesses. I had a conversation earlier. My three-letter question, why, will probably be repeated here. The war in Ukraine demonstrated both the strengths and the gaps and the ability of the organic industrial base to surge in response to a conflict. However, many of those gaps are not new. They're the result of decades of inconsistent and insufficient investment. Much of the organic industrial base infrastructure dates back to World War II. The state of these facilities impacts the ability of the workforce to reset equipment, sustain combat systems, and ensure that the warfighter has what they need when they need it. If we are serious about readiness and about supporting the soldiers in the field, we must be equally serious about modernizing the facilities that sustain them. To the Army's credit, it has developed a 15-year plan to invest $18 billion in modernizing the organic industrial base. I look forward to receiving more details about this plan, including how the fiscal year 27 budget reflects this commitment. Modernization is not just about facilities, it's about people. There are over 16,000 skilled artisans working across the organic industrial base. Over the past year, this committee has heard concerns that resignation programs, hiring freezes, reductions in permanent positions have strained depot capacity to perform the critical ground vehicle maintenance and overhauls. The modernization plan must be driven by validated workload requirements and measurable readiness outcomes, not arbitrary workforce reductions. The Army needs a deliberate workforce strategy that recruits, trains, and retains the skilled employees required to sustain the force over the long term. Lastly, one of my favorite issues is the issue of technical rights. Across the services, limited access to technical data has restricted the ability to maintain taxpayer-funded weapons systems. For the Army, restricted access to technical data has been a significant contributor to declining mission-capable rates of its ground vehicle fleet. This, combined with supply chain's issue in getting the critical parts needed, is why maintenance costs have increased while mission capabilities have decreased over the decade. As we work towards the fiscal 27 budget, I look forward to seeing how the Army's modernization plan will increase mission-capable rates, sustain the workforce, incorporate the rights to technical data to perform maintenance on our assets. I'm going to end with just one short couple of sentences, and that is, over the last 16 years as I've looked at this readiness issue in all of the departments, it all comes back to getting worse rather than better. And I want to ask the question, why? Is there a problem of the way in which we work our way through these issues? We can take one issue at a time and push it forward, but ultimately we're not really making the progress we need. In your $18 billion 15-year program, maybe you're answering the question why. If so, I'd like to hear it. With that, I yield back.
I thank the gentleman from California, Ranking Member Garamendi. We'll now go to our witnesses. I understand that Assistant Secretary Ingram and Lieutenant General Mohan will do the opening statements. So, Assistant Secretary Ingram, we'll begin with you.
Chairman Whitman, Chairman Bergman, Ranking Member Norcross, Ranking Member Garamendi, distinguished members of the House Armed Services Subcommittees on Tactical Air and Land Forces and Readiness, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Army's progress in modernizing the organic industrial base to ensure the highest state of readiness and sustain peace through strength. It is an honor to testify before you for the first time as the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology. I'm pleased to be joined by Lieutenant General Mohan, Major General Reim, who are integral members of the Army team. We appreciate your inclusion of our written statement in today's record for the hearing. The Army's organic industrial base serves as the backstop, the last line of defense for our nation, providing surge capability and functioning as a critical national asset. These facilities play a vital role in depot-level maintenance, munitions production, and strategic manufacturing. Congress's support has been instrumental in advancing the modernization of the organic industrial base, including provisions in the fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. We look forward to continuing our collaboration with this committee to implement the NDAA and achieve sustainable modernization across the department. Despite its critical role, the OIB faces significant challenges. First, fluctuating workloads, where unpredictable production cycles disrupt schedules, increase costs, and hinder workforce planning. High operating rates, where indirect costs drive up operating rates, reduce competitiveness with commercial industry. And aging infrastructure, where outdated facilities limit efficiency and the ability to support advanced technologies. And workforce skill gaps, where the need for specialized skills in advanced manufacturing and technology remains a pressing issue. We recognize these challenges and are actively addressing them. The Army is focused on increasing direct labor hours, fostering public-private partnerships, and reducing indirect costs to ensure long-term sustainability of the OIB. One of the ways we're tackling these challenges is by leveraging modern data and analytic tools. Those tools allow the Army to automate and synthesize readiness data across multiple weapon systems and units, enabling more informed resourcing decisions. I want to highlight two examples. First is Weapons 360. It's a revolutionary tool that compiles live readiness data across the Army, and then ASALT Live, which is a platform that houses live acquisition data, providing visibility into risks and challenges at all echelons. These tools are transforming how the Army sees itself, understands its data, and communicates its needs. We invite you and your staff to explore these capabilities firsthand. The Army has taken significant steps to modernize its manufacturing capabilities. Recently, we released a commercial solutions opening to accelerate advanced manufacturing initiatives at Red River Army Depot. This effort aims to modernize traditional manufacturing methods and produce new weapon system capabilities such as unmanned aircraft systems and components and robotic platforms. The response from industry has been robust, offering innovative proposals that include government-owned, contracted-operated, government-owned, government-operated, enhanced use leases, private-public partnerships, number of efforts. These initiatives will upscale the workforce, reduce indirect costs, bring private capital and new jobs to the OIB sites. They target key areas such as traditional metal and plastic components, propellants, precursor chemicals, and ammunition to reduce supply chain vulnerabilities and ensure mission success. In alignment with our modernization strategy, the Army recently announced the selection of an industry partner for an enhanced use lease at Pine Bluff Arsenal. This partnership will utilize approximately 1,000 acres of the installation to produce critical energetic materials, significantly strengthening the U.S. domestic defense industrial base. This initiative represents a $1.3 billion industry investment in a new energetics facility, underscoring the Army's commitment to modernizing the OIB and leveraging public-private partnerships to achieve readiness goals and support key allies and partners. When I testified during my confirmation hearing, I committed to modernizing the OIB as a matter of national security. In just 4 months, we made significant progress, including securing the Pine Bluff enhanced use lease, the advanced manufacturing efforts at Red River Army Depot. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The partnership between Lieutenant General Mohan, the commander of the Army Materiel Command, and myself has never been stronger. Together, we are driving change and delivering results. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Army's organic industrial base and for your unwavering support to our soldiers, civilians, and their families. Look forward to answering your questions today and continuing our collaboration to ensure the Armies can achieve readiness and modernization goals.
Assistant Secretary Ingraham, thank you so much. We'll now go to Lieutenant General Mohan.
Chairman Whitman, Chairman Bergman, Ranking Member Norcross, Ranking Member Garamendi, and distinguished members of the subcommittees, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Army's organic industrial base. We appreciate the subcommittee's shared commitment to the OIB. The Army's OIB, 23 government-owned manufacturing arsenals, maintenance depots, and ammunition plants are a critical subcomponent of the defense industrial base. The OIB not only supports operational readiness for current operation, but it preserves the nation's ability to surge during conflict. As a government-controlled capability, the OIB provides strategic depth and fills production gaps while industry scales to meet wartime demand. Although many facilities have been modernized since their World War II origins, too much of the OIB still relies upon aging infrastructure, legacy equipment, and outdated processes. Combined with fluctuating workload tied to operational tempo, these challenges now demand decisive action. In November of 2025, the Army Materiel Command delivered a report to Army senior leaders that, among other things, considered every policy, regulation, statute, and business process impacting the health and viability of the OIB. The comprehensive review assessed each OIB site and offered concrete recommendations to address OIB challenges. Among the key issues were the need to reform to balance steady state and surge capacities, improve readiness, improve efficiency, and expand industry partnerships to stabilize revenue, particularly during peacetime when workload traditionally declines. With strong senior leader support, we are moving quickly on near-term actions to strengthen the OIB. This includes the development of an OIB transformation implementation plan, which will incorporate the ongoing OIB modernization plan that has included $5 billion in investments at OIB sites over the past 3 fiscal years alone. We appreciate Congress's continued support for the OIB modernization plan. The OIB transformation plan will carry that momentum, but it will look broader than our own internal investments into the modernization of facilities and lines. It will explore innovative opportunities to increase partnerships with industry through enhanced use leases, such as the one at Pine Bluff Arsenal, innovation hubs, and non-traditional public-private partnerships, while still maximizing traditional P3 models. In conjunction with the ASALT, we have also established an OIB integration cell in the Pentagon to ensure our government-owned facilities are considered upfront in acquisition decisions. The OIB integration cell will better synchronize OIB capabilities with the acquisition program executives and Army requirements, conduct long-term OIB planning, and accelerate OIB transformation and modernization efforts. Integrated in all of our efforts is our focus on Army readiness. We've made great strides in expanding advanced manufacturing capabilities across our OIB sites. Rock Island Arsenal, the Joint Manufacturing and Technology Center, remains the center of excellence, home to our digital repository and the bulk of our advanced manufacturer capacity. But distributed capabilities, automation, and machine learning across the OIB will enable the rapid, flexible production and repair required at the speed of war. Finally, our Operational Readiness Program, or ORP, brings depot maintenance capability directly to the warfighter, and extending the reach and power of the OIB globally, connecting the OIB to the tactical edge. We have put 3 heavy armor BCTs through this our ORP program, and we're having tangible effects with increased unit readiness, maintainer proficiency, and a reduction of repair parts required during operational deployments. As a former depot commander and now the commander of Army Materiel Command, who I'm responsible for the operation of the Army's OIB, I am personally committed to ensuring the Army OIB remains a viable, responsive, and essential component of the defense industrial base. Investment in the OIB is an investment in our national security and defense. Thank you so much for your continued support. I look forward to your questions.
Lieutenant General Mohan, thanks so much. We'll go to our witnesses now with some questions. Assistant Secretary Ingraham, Major General Reim, I want to begin with the effort the Army undertook to reconfigure and reconstitute its capability and capacity to produce 155 howitzer rounds. Ranking Member Norcross and I had a chance to visit Mesquite, Texas, at a time where there was lots of excitement about the concept of a COCO, contractor-owned, contractor-operated entity, building a facility, producing large numbers of rounds very quickly. So we were impressed with the speed at which things were happening there. We are now 2 years later, and the facility has yet to produce a single projectile for 155 or any other artillery for that matter, or mortar round. That puts us in a situation today to ask, where are we going with that facility? The Army had put out there a 100,000 round annual production rate. Are we still at that particular point? Are we still going to be looking to add production capability to get to 100,000 rounds annually? And if we are, how do we sustain that rate? What's happened before is we fill our weapons magazines, we have no other room, and then we say, guess what, we're going to reduce production. Instead of looking at other ways to partner with allies to make sure that their weapons magazines are full, to look at more aggressive training where we're firing more rounds to make sure we continue to have a demand cycle that sustains that. All those things are part of that. So if you could shed some light on us about where we are with Mesquite, the Mesquite facility, the 100,000 projection, and where we are with continuing to build the industrial base.
Chairman, thank you for the question. First, let me start by saying I'm not happy with where we are at Mesquite either, right? So I'm in the same boat you are. I'll talk about Mesquite in a second. As far as the 100,000 capacity that we were trying to reach, I agree, boom to bust is a real thing. We've seen it in every major every major conflicts following World War II, right? It doesn't matter where it is, we've gone boom to bust on every single munition. And so as we ensure that we've got enough capacity to support what the U.S. Army needs, along with sort of the extended demand signal we continue to see from allies and partners, we're still shooting for that 100,000 goal. We're still trying to get there. So now back to specifically what's happening at Mesquite. Absolutely. If you go back to 2022 with the Russian invasion on Ukraine and the use of 155, we're at 14,000 a month. We're now pushing north of 56,000 a month, so we've seen a significant increase. And that's important to highlight that that's more than just the metal parts they make at Mesquite, right? That's been into everything that goes into building a 155, right? So that's the metal parts, the load assembly pack, the charges, the fuses, everything that goes into that. So we've seen a significant scaling up of all of those capabilities over the last few years. Mesquite there was risk taken, right, when we did the Mesquite project. Risk from the technology of the assembly line, the production line that was installed. But at that time, there was agreed upon we would take both risk on the government and contractor side to deliver on that sort of capability. And so we are currently in the middle of, so I guess to put it clearly, the stop work is still in place. We are currently in negotiation with General Dynamics about what the future of that looks like. And I anticipate you will see an investment from the company themselves, from the industry partner themselves, to ensure they can continue to build out for that facility that would make rounds that would primarily be supported by the FMS, the foreign materials demand that we currently have. But we are currently in negotiation what that looks like, both from a line perspective, a quantity perspective, and hopefully we'll have that wrapped up soon. But I'll pause there and turn it over to General Reim if he has anything else he'd like to add to that.
General Reim.
Mr. Chairman, I share your same concerns of where we're at with Mesquite. But let me first just say, thank you for your continued support and advocacy. the authorities and the resourcing that enabled us to get after this 100,000 per month mandate have been instrumental to the progress we've made. I mean, it's a historic level of funding that we've received, to the likes we haven't seen since World War II.
Yeah.
And the investments we've made, both in terms of advanced manufacturing capability, adding resilience, improving workforce safety with the modernization efforts is critically important. So when we kicked off this surge, it was with a lot of the 1940s aging infrastructure, and it really forced us to look at, other sources to reach some of this capacity. And so when you think of a 155, right, we've got a fuse, we've got, a metal projectile, we've got an energetic fill, we've got a propelling charge and a primer. And so we made investments to add, second and third sources in some cases to get to this number. I think the beauty of that is that those investments, are bringing advanced manufacturing, automation, all the things that are going to add resilience, are going to improve workforce safety with some of our facilities. And so you look at Line 3A, down in Iowa as an example. That's been in continuous operation since 1940. We just awarded a contract this past fall for a future artillery center that's going to be, probably the most advanced melt pour operation where we load our artillery projectiles. New 6-8 facility. No one could remember when the last time we built anything new at Lake City. The answer was 26 December 1940. They found it in Harry S. Truman's Presidential Library. It's the last time we built anything new. And so we certainly appreciate, all the support going forward and look forward to continue working with you, because a lot of those investments were very targeted towards 155, and there's a lot more to the conventional munitions space than just artillery.
Yeah, there's a lot more left to do, and we appreciate the Army being willing to take risks, and we've said this plainly and clearly, that is, take risks, but if you're going to fail quickly. Make sure you take away lessons from that. Make sure we recover as much of the resources that we've expended there. Make sure, too, that we have partners that are willing to share in the risk. I think that's key with this Mesquite facility, and listen, I understand folks not wanting to say, "Oh, that was a failure," but I want to make sure that if there's not a clear and quick path to recovering there, that we're not afraid to say, "Hey, sorry, we're going to move on. We learned something from that. We spent some money, but let's move on to the next stop in that effort." Let me ask one other real quick question about novel energetics. We talk about being cast in the past as far as our weapons production capability. We are still there when it comes to weapons chemistry. We are using two weapons compounds, both for explosives and propellants, that go back to World War II, RDX and HMX, and we developed the more modern novel energetics in CL-20. And our adversaries use as their metric CL-20, we use as our metric the substances that are developed in 1940. So when we ask the question, why are the Chinese having more success in range and lethality, and they're using the weapons chemistry that we developed, and we wonder why we're getting outsticked? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. And then it's taken us so long to actually ramp up and put in place an Office of Energetics so we can look at that and modernize these weapons platforms. I want to get a perspective from you all about how you think the Joint Energetics Office is going to operate, and what will it do to quickly modernize existing weapon systems and look at modern energetics for future weapon systems. We know initially there's been a lot of success there. That shouldn't be surprising, since CL-20, CL stands for China Lake. We actually developed this stuff, and then we allow the Chinese to steal it and use it against us. It just doesn't make sense. So give me a pathway forward where we're going to be using novel energetics to get back in the business of range and lethality.
So, Chairman, I don't disagree that we need to continue to figure out how to get better energetics in most of our weapon systems. And so I agree with you, the fact that the JETO office will hopefully be the guiding light for that for the department as we continue to move forward. Why that is being stood up, the Army has not waited. The Army's continue to move. We got 3 projects right now where we are integrating CL-20 into 3 different weapons to prove out how well or how the weapon design will have to change to successfully use those materials. And so those are going to lead to a variety of tests that are occurring later this year, but absolutely moving out. We see other areas that we think we can, CL-20 will bring better capabilities for us, whether that's longer range munitions where weight becomes a challenge. Think everything from one-way attack UAS to longer range munitions. We also see it in small UAS where you have small UAS that can't carry a lot of payload, and so to get a bigger bang for the buck with the payload. And so absolutely as a prior naval weapons system engineer, understand what we do at the labs and where that was created, and there's lots of capabilities like that we have within our labs that we need to continue to bring to the forefront, and we see the JETO office as sort of leading that charge for us.
That's great. Thank you for doing that. There's a lot of capability out there that happens at our labs, that happens at a lot of places where some great research is done, like DARPA and others. Unfortunately, it gets put on the shelf because they're not allowed to be advocates for their products, and they can't go out and actively find customers. We have to find a way to close that gap too, because I think if a lot of people out there in the combat space knew these things were available, they would be the biggest advocates to put them in their arsenal. So with that, I'll turn to my colleague, Mr. Norcross, for his questions. And with that, Mr. Norcross, the floor
Thank
is
you,
yours.
Chairman. We've heard repeatedly the SecDef talk about sending the demand signals to the industry so that they can react appropriately in the relevance of time. So first question goes to you, Assistant Secretary Ingraham. We've talked about the 100,000 round goal per month on the 155s. I believe you said we are still looking to make that goal. So A, for what period of time? Because it goes directly to the question of sending the signals. Great, 100,000, we made it 2 months and we're backing off. How long do you anticipate, in rough numbers, that 100,000 goal?
So that number from a U.S. perspective, right? Like I said, boom to bust is real, right? We are getting closer and closer to coming up to our tamers, to our sort of readiness numbers that we need back for 155 for conventional shells, right? But we're not there yet. We also know that there's still a demand from a number of our allies and partners that are out there, and so I do not see us backing off from that number for a few years yet.
Okay, good news. You mentioned the different parts for the 155s, and we talked about Mesquite as being the metal. Where is the choke point right now on the building of each shell? Is it the metal, the energetics? Where are we?
I'm going to let General Reim cover that. He's closer to the day-to-day operations of the shell.
Two areas. For the 100,000 number, early on, metal parts was the LIMFAC, it was driving, the focus of our efforts. And so, we had a kind of phased of approach. We had the mission to produce as many as humanly possible on day one at existing facilities. In parallel, we were making investments to bring other sources online. We've been successful with IMT in Canada. Just right before the holidays, we had successfully did first article tests, and they're in production. We all know about Mesquite, and it's not where we want, but we've also invested heavily in Scranton. And that's a tough challenge to produce at max capacity while doing targeted modernization. And I would tell you that Scranton is unrecognizable from when you were out there most recently, visiting the facility. All the old 5-inch, all the old M107 equipment's out. There's new floors, there's new lights, new parking lot. We refurbished the crane. We've got our new go-to-war rounds, the 1128, 1113 lines going in. It is completely different. Later this summer, we'll realize, kind of phase 2 of the expansion at Scranton, and we'll be at 35,000. The sister, commercial operation right there in Wilkes Barre, that's at 21,000. We'll be at 56,000. So I think we'll be in a good spot there. What concerns me now is energetics and some of the fragility with supply chain, in particular, and some of our dependencies on international sourcing, in some cases adversarial sourcing. And the team's worked really hard there, one, to see ourselves. We've got a really fantastic assured munitions team. As we like to say, we can see ourselves from the ground to the round. And that's driven a lot of near-term investments with other international partners while we look to leverage authorities like the Defense Production Act to onshore critical capabilities, things like TNT, antimony, or I think recent examples that are going to make a difference.
Okay, so Mesquite, we talked about it, and the equipment that was envisioned to be able to produce the 155s and others apparently is not operating as we expected. Are we at the point that we're going to throw in the towel on the equipment and refit it to the likes of Scranton?
So we're in negotiations right now with General Dynamics.
Okay, got that.
We're
When can you share with us when we expect that we'll be able to get the 155s? Give me a quarter, last quarter of this year, beginning. We're just trying to get an idea after 2+ years. How close are we getting?
So in terms of delivery of part, I don't think we're that close. In
Okay.
terms of a plan of what a rescoped Mesquite would look like, I think we'll see that here very quickly.
Okay, I yield back.
Okay, I guess since I'm going to recognize myself then. All right. First of all, Ingraham or Ingram?
Ingraham.
Ingraham. Mohan or Mohan?
It's Mohan, sir.
Mohan. All right. I'm kind of hooked on phonics here. General Mohan, inadequate supply resources and a misaligned organic industrial base continue, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, a low mission capability rate. Can you better explain why this is occurring and describe for us your plan to rapidly increase our readiness to better meet program design standards?
Yes, sir, and thank you for the question. So I would say to the why we are where we are right now, I can't speak particularly to the decisions that were made between are we going to modernize and buy new stuff, or are we going to sustain the current fleet that we have. What I can tell you is the way that we are attacking the problem in Army Materiel Command of particularly those units that are under the highest stress. And so our biggest consumers right now are our heavy BCTs, our Armored Brigade Combat Teams. They consume the most maintenance capability, they consume the most Class 9. And so what we've done is, with our Operational Readiness Program, instead of taking a fleet-based view, because quite frankly, some of our worst vehicles will wash out at the size of our fleets, we've started looking at a unit-based view, synchronizing the capability that we have with the timelines and the train-up of a division commander, and doing several things. One, we apply heavy depot maintenance teams, export them from Anniston and Red River down to the unit's motor pool to help the unit see themselves. Then we harvest the worst of their vehicles, the ones that are consuming the most man hours, the ones that are consuming the most Class 9 or repair parts, and we give them new ones that are coming off the depot production line. And then finally, we follow that unit through their deployment with depot maintenance capability, and we're seeing great results. And so for example, 1st Brigade, 1st Armored Division is our latest ORP candidate. They just loaded the boat to go to Europe, and they loaded with one of the legacy, one of our oldest equipment fleets. They loaded the boat at the highest readiness rate of any ABCT in the Army. So we know it works. The last rotation that went through during their 9-month rotation in Europe consumed $30 million less in Class 9 in repair parts and maintained a higher readiness rate. So in the future, we look to double down on that, and instead of doing a smaller subset of harvesting of vehicles, we're going to expand that by threefold because the process is working. The second one is I would pull the thread on is advanced manufacturing. So it's not only access to tech data, it's access to digitized tech data that we're after. So if you go to one of our academia partners, the National Institute for Avionics Research, you'll see a B-1 bomber, you'll see all fixed-wing fighter jets. You'll also see an M88 that is over sitting in the corner, and they're taking apart and digitizing every part on that so that we can digitize it and use it for advanced manufacturing. And we're exploding that capability across the Army, across our organic industrial base, and down at unit levels, connecting it all in a digital repository and a connected network of capability that is powered by data that says here are the parts that we need to produce, and then we produce those parts in different places across to solve the challenge that we're having with readiness rates. All the while putting pressure on our industry partners who owe us right now over $500 million worth of delinquent back orders of repair parts, so that we are putting pressure on them to produce and to deliver the parts that we have ordered.
Thank you. Honorable Ingraham. Boy, that's a mouthful. There's a lot of syllables in there. What steps is the Army taking to ensure that digital twin technologies and advanced manufacturing early in the acquisition process with those areas to ensure that we can adequately maintain our ground vehicles? General Mohan kind of talked about it a little bit, but you want to put a little more meat on the bone?
Absolutely, Chairman. Appreciate that. Absolutely. So first of all, competition drives a lot of that right up front, right? So as we get more competition into the acquisition process, that's driving a lot more commercial products in ability to get after a number of those areas where we don't have the technical data rights. The second piece of that I'll talk to, is really asking for the right technical data up front, right? We have had the approach across the government for many of years to ask for it all, right? We want it all. We don't need it all. There are certain aspects of the technical data we need. Those we need to ensure we're asking for the right technical data up front is a key piece of that. The second thing is, General Mohan talked about it, right? We have gotten technical data from industry in the past when we have either bought it or negotiated up front in some of our acquisition strategies, and then we had no place to put that technical data. It resides on CDs or, somebody's computer somewhere. And so having an infrastructure that allows us to have that data in one place, that allows access to that data from, an echelon, right? So if the unit on the front line wants to be able to 3D print a part because they got a 3D printer, they should be able to have access to that data just as easy as, General Mohan and each one of the depots has access to that data. So building out that network and that data infrastructure is critical, and those are a couple of areas we're working on to ensure that we have the right IP, the right data, and can actually sustain our capabilities.
Okay, thanks. General Mohan, as we look to the future and note the need to transform our tactical vehicle fleet, we know that we'll be maintaining a number of Humvees in the enduring fleet. Approximately 70,000 is what we've heard. To that end, we know that the organic industrial base played a critical role maintaining, modifying, and upgrading those vehicles to not only address the current missions, but also to ensure the safety of all of our soldiers. We note that the continuation of the rollover mitigation in your spend plan, which we applaud. It's because safety's the number one priority. What else do you envision for the tactical wheeled vehicles that ensure our ground platforms maintain top levels of readiness in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is to continue to install anti-lock brake kits in the Humvees that we need, and so that work is ongoing at Red River Army Depot, as well as we do modifications, working with our ASALT partners, cutting into the line things like for HEMTT tankers, for example, cutting into the line those safety modifications, like for example, rollover mitigation that will automatically shut off the fuel tank system. That is required in Europe. We're doing those modifications, as well as anti-lock brakes, and while we're doing the same thing, preparing them for autonomous driving. So there are certain things for autonomous operation that are required electronic steering controls, electronic traction. Those are being cut into new production lines, as well as when we do rebuilds, for example.
Okay, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Garamendi.
I want to thank my colleagues for raising the energetics issue and really honing in on that. Obviously, very, very important. It's an issue that I could have spent time on, but they did a much better job. I do want to go to the readiness of the Army vehicles. An ongoing, an increasing problem. All of the data indicates that it's getting worse, not better. You spoke, Generally, Mohan, a moment ago about some of the things that you're doing. Here's what I think we need, and that is to get down into the weeds with you and look at your data flow and the information that you're gathering over time, the implementation of the various initiatives that you're putting in place, and the success or failure of them. I really think that we have to spend our time and demand of you at least a quarterly report on what's going on. First, what your initiatives are, what their goal is, and then a mechanism to assess the success of those initiatives. I'm not going to put myself in the middle of that effort, other than I want to see the success or failure over time of the specific initiatives that you put in place. You spoke to them a moment ago. Can you do that?
I'd like to add a little bit to, sir, it comes back to the, also the harvesting of the data. So we started Weapons System 360 about 18 months ago because we were struggling with the supply chain, and we really couldn't see ourselves. And the capability that has been largely developed by our teams, it continues to advance. And now, because we've placed that in the Army data platform, we are hooking other things to it, adding additional layers to that data. And so, in the very near future, we will roll out an application that will integrate in with Next Gen C2, that will change the way that our soldiers do basic maintenance operations. And so when we get better data at that basic level, that will feed into Weapons 360, which will then allow us to make strategic decisions both in the depots with planning of workload, but also with the way that we make decisions about buying or manufacturing our own parts.
What you intend to do is the right thing to do. I believe it's necessary for us to learn precisely what it is you're trying to do and what effect you expect from that action. And then through time, and I'm going quarterly, report to yourself and to us how it's going. In that way, you'll know whether you're on a successful track or not. You're talking a lot about additive manufacturing and all of that. It's the new bright, shiny thing that everybody talks about. And the question is, what are you going to use it for? Is it cheaper, faster, or better than giving, I don't know, Lockheed Martin and BAE a swift kick and say, let's get this done? So anyway, it is the data and the specificity of the data to the goals that you have set. I'm not disagreeing at all with your goals. They're good. You got to come down in the detail, gather the data, report to yourself and to us how it's going, and we'll go from there. There are many, many issues in your, what do you got, 11 different vehicles that you're trying to keep going. I think some of it has to do with attitude. I had an experience over the weekend. We were shipping some cattle. The truck came back, flat tire, last load of the day, and my grandchildren said, we'll deal with that later. And I'm going, you're going to deal with it tonight because we may need this thing tomorrow. Well, we don't know that we need it tomorrow. And so I don't know if they've learned the lesson or not. I haven't had a chance to go back and check my data. So anyway, it flows through the entire system. And included in that is all of the new bright, shiny things that you're dealing with. Are they really useful? I spoke earlier to the question of why. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing it this way or that way? You have the information. It's your job. It's our job to review it and say, I don't think that's working. I want to make a final point, and then I'll turn it back to my colleague. I'm concerned about the quality of the contracts that the Department of Defense is writing with the defense industrial base. We've spent part of this morning looking at some of those contracts and finding that we're being taken to the cleaners. We, the taxpayers, the Department of Defense, military, various places, that the contracts do not serve the purpose for which they are written, but rather serve the purpose of the defense industrial base in its effort to grow, to be profitable, whatever goals they may have. I'm coming to the point where we have absolutely really good people in the various departments that write contracts, but they're not on top of the most recent problems that are found in contracts or able to really get beyond what they have done so many times over many years. And it may very well be in our interest, ours and yours, to bring into the major contracting and quite possibly into some of what you might call minor contracting, a fresh view from a company, a firm, a law firm, whomever. They're working for you. And their task is that that contract carries out the specific goals that you have enunciated as you set in motion a contract. I've found this problem too many times in too many areas. The final 276 pages, none of the rest counts unless we want to do it. So I want to think about that. I want you to think about it. Maybe my colleagues would be interested in it also. But these contracts are written for all too often for the benefit of the defense industrial base and not necessarily to protect the goals and the necessity, in this case, the Army and the other departments. With that, I yield back, sir.
Gentleman yields. I recognize myself for questioning. Gentlemen, thank you for being here this afternoon. This is troubling. This is a troubling discussion because our projection of force worldwide requires a level of readiness and mission capability that, according to our own studies and our own determinations, does not measure up, shall we say. And this presents a danger to the world. We are relied upon. It's said that the sun does not set on the responsibilities of the United States military to restore and maintain peace. And our projection of force worldwide requires a level of readiness and mission capability out of our stockpiles and our maintenance and at the unit level that that we're not delivering right now. So if this committee has failed in some way, then we accept that responsibility. But we have to take a hard, cold look at this. We're talking about today the organic industrial base, a subset of the larger defense industrial base. We're talking about 23 arsenals, depots, and ammunition plants that manufacture and maintain Army equipment. Now, I'm going to focus my questioning, Lieutenant General Mohan, on maintenance. The organic industrial base, according to the GAO, is antiquated and not sufficient to maintain, and certainly during times of needed surge. The GAO found that the number of overhauls of maintenance depots performed by the Army dropped from 1,278 in fiscal year 2015 to 12 in fiscal year 2024. I'd like you to speak to what extent is our failure to deliver mission-capable and ready Army vehicles, to what extent is that caused by our failure to modernize and expand our maintenance depots? And what shall we do about that, Lieutenant General?
And so, sir, thank you for that question. I think it comes down to the why is the conflict between, hey, let's buy a whole bunch of new stuff versus let's look after the stuff that we have. And so we fell victim to, hey, let's buy a whole bunch of new stuff. And then increased op tempo has also played a part in it. I will tell you, we were reversing that trend. And just in the ORP program alone, this past year, just that one program alone, we are over 200 vehicles that we have completely remanufactured and rebuilt in our depots. And then in the future, and I'm talking about the future of this year and next year, we're going to expand that threefold. Again, focused on those highest consumers of readiness, but also the units that are first to fight. And it's not just our ABCTs. It's
General, you mentioned, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you mentioned focused on unit, you're coordinating your maintenance with unit readiness. I think this is wise. I'd like you to respond to, the Army said that basically material and parts, Bill, but it's a big problem. And you talk about the difference between buying new stuff and fixing our old stuff. Now, I'm an Army veteran. I was a staff sergeant in the Army, military police officer. And your equipment has got to work for you guys on the ground. We left, America's watching this. This is a legitimate question. We left a lot of military equipment to the Taliban when we left Afghanistan. And allegedly, the stuff didn't work. We're not providing them parts. But right now, they're driving those old vehicles. So if they can repair our old vehicles, seemingly manufacturing parts out of dust, what can we do to focus our available funding and energies and intellect and our combined desire to accomplish that mission to get it done better, to repair our old equipment? Are we missing something?
there's several pieces. What we see when we execute our operational readiness program, the feedback that I get from battalion commanders, brigade commanders, and division commanders is, hey, the extra mechanics that come down, so we'll send a team of 40 mechanics. 15-year experience of, that's the average of our M1 tank mechanics in the industrial base, 15 years. They say, hey, the extra toolboxes are great, but the key piece and the best piece of this is the training that happens when our folks get next to young soldiers. So a young soldier has 18 months experience working on M1s. Our guys know the tricks of the trade, and here's the other thing. We're a blue-collar organization. Our folks are not sitting there with their hands on their hips saying, do this. They're saying, hey, watch me do this, and then you're going to do the next one. And so what we see in that diminished requirement for Class 9 is a focus on ordering the right kind of parts, and then you couple that with enhanced technology where you have the digital tech manuals loaded on a TAC device to order the right kind of parts. Then we see all the pieces starting to come together. But it is a cultural issue that we have to attack.
I'd love to talk with you more about this. My time is well expired. Mr. Sorensen is recognized for questioning.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that Russia invaded the sovereign country of Ukraine 4 years ago today. May we keep our focus while we continue to learn the tactics that will keep civilians safe and continue our readiness in the fight of good versus evil. I want to welcome Assistant Secretary Ingraham, General Reim, and my friend General Mohan. Someone who, before this very hearing today, shared some great memories of you and your wife when you were stationed in Rock Island, and we are thankful for your service as a Quad citizen, I would say. I'm so glad that today we get to talk about modernizing our organic industrial base, because this is such an important topic, and it's something that all of my neighbors who work around the Rock Island Arsenal know firsthand. Last year, as part of our NDAA, we created a pilot workload sustainment program with Army depots and arsenals modeled after my Arsenal Workload Sustainment Act. The House and the Senate include this language because having a more predictable workload is critical to sustaining our OIB workforce and meeting the dynamic needs of our warfighters. It's a proven model. It builds off of successful public-private partnerships like the one that we have at Rock Island's JMTC and AM General. For Assistant Secretary Ingraham and as well as General Mohan, could either of you comment on the timeline for developing guidance on implementing Section 348, as well as any guidance, formal and informal, that you are providing to OIB leadership to encourage that we have more partnerships in the future?
Sir, I would just point directly to the Organic Industrial Base Integration Cell that we have established in the Pentagon. That is a teamwork event with Mr. Ingraham and his staff, where as we implement acquisition reform, we will have representation in each one of the PAEs that will get it on the front end. Again, the front end of the acquisition process to say, this work is going to go to the organic industrial base to balance that between the OIB and the broader DIB.
Congressman, I can't speak to the past, but what I can tell you is, you know, as we've set up this optimization cell, this is an opportunity for General Mohan and I to look at every platform that's coming through. Whatever the new platform is, the new widget, old widgets, as they come through the acquisitions, you know, sort of cycle, we are looking at them to figure out where is the best place to sustain and maintain these. And again, driving those direct labor hours back into the OIB, because we need those direct labor hours on the ground.
Great. And then as we get up front of the process, then that allows us to tailor our modernization program. So for example, looking at the future for the MV-75, we know that we're going to have to do composites. So we're working and developing that composite repair capability right now at Corpus Christi, for example. And we're doing that well ahead of the first fielding. That's the model we're following, sir.
Great. I've been really encouraged by the Army's effort to establish Sky Foundry and meet its goal of 3D printing 10,000 drones per month. I'm especially glad to see that the Army is leveraging the Additive and Advanced Manufacturing Center for Excellence at Rock Island Arsenal, and it's important that it remains part of Sky Foundry. General Mohan, can you comment more on the ecosystem that AMC is setting up to support Sky Foundry? And beyond drones, do you see that this setup could be something that could be used to bring manned or unmanned other systems to the Army?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. So Sky Foundry is a broader subset or a smaller subset of our broader advanced manufacturing effort that we're ongoing. And so for example, and Sky Foundry is part of a network. And the equipment that we're and the capability that we're building as part of that are useful for other things. So for example, we already do 3D printing of circuit cards at Tobyhanna Army Depot for radar and radios. So we will produce circuit cards for UAS off the same machines. The composite or the carbon fiber-based 3D printing capability that we were expanding at Rock Island is carbon fiber that we will use for multiple types of projects. But the key piece, sir, is to build the network and connect it all digitally, because as you know, the goal is that our production facilities run lights out. And so having that ecosystem of capability connected digitally, so we can move workload around to wherever where we have machine time, so those machines are constantly producing. Because as you know, we have titanium printing machines that will take 4 days to print a part. We cannot afford to have one that is not running all the time. And so that is part of that broader challenge that we're facing. And then the last thing, if I can, is it's not only we know how to reverse engineer, we know how to produce parts, but then we put them through an antiquated qualification process. And my partner, Mr. Ingraham, as well as General Hodney, that is our next big target, is to move that qualification process to the front side of the manufacturing process using digital simulation and modeling. So if we can run a M88 for 5,000 miles in a synthetic environment to test a part, that is what industry does. And so we're actively attacking that right now.
Let us know what this committee can do to help expedite that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman, and I'll go to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you know, we wouldn't have a country without our men and women in our military. To all of our witnesses and all of our veterans, our active duty military, thank you for your service. As we modernize the organic industrial base to meet warfighter demand, I want to focus on surge capacity, single point supply risk, and how we sustain today's gain without a bust tomorrow. But I want to start off with Major General Reim. You know, we talked earlier about energetics and antimony. For the layman, how important is antimony? And am I
Thanks
saying
for that question. If you want a munition to go bang or boom, it all starts with antimony. And so we find that in all our primers and all our detonators.
So true or false, we used to rely heavily on China for these energetics.
We were 100% dependent on Chinese sourcing.
Now, do we still depend on China for that?
We do not. They've weaponized the supply chain here, and they have cut off.
So then we began to rely on India. Is that true?
We very quickly pivoted and qualified a new source out of India. Yes.
And what efforts are we making so that we can do that here in the United States?
So in parallel, we embarked on a longer-term strategy, and that was to reopen a gold mine in Stibnite, Idaho.
World War II.
World War II produced tungsten as well as antimony.
Right. And then, of course, some of the energetics, chemicals that we use to feed artillery and things like that are also needed for rocket motor missiles. Is that correct?
You are correct.
Okay. Then my next question is for the Honorable Mr. Ingraham. As we modernize Radford and other organic baselines that feed solid rocket motor production, would introduce an additional qualified rocket motor manufacturers help translate those organic base upgrades into real resilience and cost savings across the Army munitions portfolios? And if so, what steps are you taking to reduce barriers for new entrants in that field?
So, Congressman, I'd like to actually bring it back to something General Reim mentioned earlier. You know, when we think about the ability to have those key components, I'll call them key starting materials, right? Starting right from sort of the rare earth materials, you know, so going from the ground to the factory floor. You know, a number of areas that I have more concerns in is sort of as we get from that rare earth material in what we call midstream and materialization. So how we actually take those raw materials, turn them into a powder, a substance of something, and then turn that into, you know, a metal or a product that we could actually put on a factory floor to make into an end component. We lack a lot of the midstream and upstream sort of capabilities in this country as we think about bringing on things. Bring in, you know, we can reopen mines, which is absolutely the critical step to onshore capabilities like antimony, like we just heard about. But the ability then to turn that into a product becomes a challenge. And so when we talk about bringing on new rocket motor manufacturers and that sort of stuff, similar, they are going to struggle, all of those sort of manufacturers struggle with that midstream capability, right? So how we get from sort of the rare earth materials to a product that they can mix in a mixing bowl and pour into a casting to make a rocket motor. And so that's actually, when you talk about where I'm concerned and where the biggest risks are, is there. And so how are we doing that? We are working closely with the Office of Secretary of Defense, industrial-based policy, using the Defense Production Act to get after a number of those key areas that are not just only support the Army, but support us as a nation, where we've got critical gaps in some of that processing piece, metallization piece that we've got to get after.
That sounds great. I think this kind of, you just answered this next question, but let's make sure we got it right. So how is the Deputy Secretary of War and Office of Industrial Base Policy coordinating with you and your munitions teams to map supply chain vulnerabilities to platform level requirements? And what can we do in the Armed Services Committee to help you get there?
Yeah, so Congressman, I mentioned, working with OSW, industrial-based policy. In fact, something they have is called an industrial-based council. We actually just had it earlier this week where we get together, look at those supply chains, right? And they have mapped those supply chains all the way from the rare earth material to the factory floor across roughly the 32 critical raw rare earth materials that we are currently trying to onshore and grow. And so there are gaps there. And as we look across the investments that they are making, investments that we're making sort of larger across the whole of government approach, investments, commerce or others are making in those spaces, ensuring we're deconflicting and not sort of going heavy in one area and nothing in another area, right? And so they are sort of the deconflicting of that space, as well as executing, Defense Production Act authorities in the space. And so we are working close with them to ensure that Army investments align with sort of the greater strategy.
Well, I'm out of time, but let us know how we can help. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. We'll now go to Mr. Mesmer for his 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I just attended a groundbreaking of a new solid rocket motor manufacturing site at a munitions campus just outside of Crane Army ammunition activity in my district. The munitions campus, anchored by Prometheus Energetics, is a joint venture between Kratos and Rafael, and a great example of building capacity and munitions readiness. Supporting these kind of projects at munitions campuses surrounding our arsenal activity sites should be highly considered as we modernize our organic industrial base. Assistant Secretary Ingraham, how is the Army structuring acquisition strategies and contracting mechanisms to fully leverage newly qualified partners, and what additional authorities or resources would help accelerate their contribution to the readiness solution?
Congressman, it absolutely starts with sort of the lowering the barriers to entry. And so we are absolutely looking at a number of efforts, working closely with some of the other services, specifically Air Force and Navy, on how we're ensuring that there's a lot of solid rocket motor manufacturers that are starting to grow up, because there was a significant demand in that, and there still is a significant demand to fill that gap. And so as we look at a number of our future munitions, we're looking at a number of open competitions that will allow vendors to bring their capabilities forward through a number of test phases where we can qualify multiple sources to really drive the competition in industry and bring multiple vendors on board for multiple munitions. So we're not limited to a single solid rocket motor manufacturer.
Okay, thank you. Also, Assistant Secretary, roughly 1,700 parts have been identified as suitable for additive manufacturing. What acquisition pathways is the Army using to accelerate qualification and scale of production of these parts?
So Lieutenant General Mohan talked a little bit about how we're currently using sort of additive manufacturing capacity that we already have within the Army to get after a number of those capabilities. There are also outside entities, companies, right, that have 3D printing sort of manufacturing facilities that we are working to qualify to come on board and be able to produce these parts as well. I think the challenge, as General Mohan highlighted, is really the qualification process right now inside the Army. That's on us to figure out how to qualify these parts faster so we can get them into the field quicker. And that's definitely a challenge that General Mohan and General Hodney at T2Com and the three of us are working towards.
Okay, that leads right into my next question. What is the average time required to qualify an additive manufactured component?
So I think that's the challenge we're facing right now, right? So when we talk, safety critical parts, something that's going to go on a fixed wing or a rotary wing aircraft, there's a different level of test and maturity that we need to do on that part relative to a part that's going to go on, a wad of buffalo that's going to tow on a trailer behind a JLTV, right? There's different levels of risk that we have to take, and that's where we've got one path right now. And so we are working through to change sort of the levels of risk that would allow us to accept, much more risk on lower parts that are not concerned for airworthiness or things like of that nature. But I'll let General Mohan tie into that if he's got some other additional.
Yeah, so our current process can take anywhere from 60 days to 14, 15 months. And so that's where we have when we've got to build the digital twins of vehicles. So we've already done we're doing the M88 now. We've got the Bradley. We're going to do the 777 howitzer. And that 1700 is probably just for the M88. And so we're building this digital repository that will not only allow us to print, but also when we build it, it's got the type of printer it was printed on, it's got the specifications, the material that will allow other units and partners. We've qualified 6 other outside of the Army entities to be qualified suppliers. And so as we move to the future, they will manufacture and ship parts for us once we solve the qualification process.
Okay, thank you. I yield back the remainder of my time.
I thank the gentleman. We'll go to a second round of questions. And General Reim, I want to begin with you. We know that at Radford Ammunition Plant, there's been underway a construction of a new nitrocellulose production facility. The construction started in 2008, and we're still waiting to see when we're going to get to full-rate production of nitrocellulose. When you go there and you visit, it is like taking a step back in time. You go to the current nitrocellulose production facility. It's an area where you have board planks where you go from vat to vat, where they're boiling and mixing the different components and brewing, as I like to call it, nitrocellulose. You go in there and literally it's raining from the ceiling. And when you ask the technicians there, you say, why is this place just like a sauna? And they go, oh, sir, we have to keep the level of humidity high enough so the place doesn't explode. And I'm like, boy, that gives me a lot of nice confidence that we have a modern technology facility where we're producing a highly volatile material under very, very adverse conditions. And that's how we produce the majority of our nitrocellulose. We have a nice modern facility next door, continuous flow, so we feed the chemicals together in a very controlled environment and where we don't have nearly the amount of risk. And yet that facility continues to be delayed. And the older facility there where we're cooking in an old vat on nitrocellulose is what we continue to do today. Give me some hope or some view about where we're going to be with the new production facility, when it's going to be at full rate production, and when we can finally abandon the Witch's Brew facility there where we're now concocting nitrocellulose.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for that. And I kind of share your sentiments on Radford. That was a great description and rundown. I got some good news for you.
Good.
That we've successfully completed an endurance run. Mm-hmm. We're working through the various classes of nitrocellulose, doing first article testing, and we expect to be fully commissioned by April. We're also discussing having a ribbon cutting ceremony come June, and we'll ensure that you get a personal invite.
What's that? The question was, which April?
April of 2026.
There we go. I like it. I like it. Very good. Well, you put us on the list for the ribbon cutting ceremony, and that'll be an exciting day. Let me ask this. You know, we have places like Radford. We have a number of other facilities across the United States. We heard there at Mr. Mesmer's district and others. We have great facilities with great capacity. And we talked today about the organic industrial base, where the organic industrial base begins right at the facilities where we've had this magnificent production capability on large geographic footprints that is well situated to do even more. So the question is as we look into the future and we look at sustained increased production for our weapon systems, whether it's solid rocket motors, and they make a few of those at Radford also, how do we utilize the capability that we have in the organic industrial base of these existing facilities, not just in modernization, but also in expansion to where we have that as a fully controlled organic capability within the Army or within the armed forces, for that matter, versus having to rely on contractors outside to do things. And obviously, they're hesitant when we tell them, build 100,000 rounds of 155, and then 5 years later, when weapons magazines are full, we go, we don't need much anymore, so do 10,000 rounds a year. And they're like, well, wait a minute, we have all this sunk cost in these facilities, why would we want to do this again? So that's where we're going to have to find the right combination of organic industrial capacity as well as the private contractor capacity. Tell us how we utilize the capacity in places like Radford to the best advantage of the Army and, for that matter, across the spectrum of the armed forces.
I think Radford is unique, you know, with nitrocellulose. It's the only U.S. source of NC. I certainly also appreciate, you know, the Section 806 authorities that we have that gives me the ability to restrict competition and direct work there, so that when we are in a surge period, that we actually do have a capability to manufacture at scale. As we previously discussed, and your great description of how we currently make nitrocellulose, that has left us behind with some of our more advanced propellant systems. And today, while I have that authority to restrict, there's certain classes of nitrocellulose that Radford's not capable of making, and so we're forced to import from Czech Republic, the French, Koreans, and then further process in Canada before we bring it back to one of our OIB sites at Iowa, as an example, to do load assemble pack. And so we've got some, thanks to your continued support, we've got some investment, planned to do the necessary things to enable us to produce, some of these, more advanced propellants, going forward. Above and beyond, just our artillery. We've also got risks in kind of our main battle tank, tactical rounds and some of the propellants there. And what we're seeing with, cannon calibers, 20 through 40 millimeter, that we're dependent on European sourcing for those propellants, and I think there's a great opportunity to continue to modernize there. I think some of the key lessons learned from Ukraine is that while our partners donated a number of howitzers, they very quickly ran out of the munitions that came with those howitzers. And it was incumbent on us to go forward and do all the safety and engineering analysis, to building of firing tables that allowed the safe use of U.S.-produced munitions in those systems. And so I think there's a robust international demand, for U.S. munitions. Up to this point, in all fairness, to the facilities themselves, we've workloaded 100% of available production capacity. And as we see the kind of the normalizing of, prioritization and resourcing, we're in conversations now of, hey, what does the minimum sustaining rate look like going forward? But we're also throwing out these opportunities that now we've got, available capacity that can solve, some of these international demands. We're also encouraged with a number of private equity and self-investing here in the U.S. And that's a component of, there's a new facility going in Carrollton, Texas. They're going to make, just shell bodies. But they're going to need a fuse. They're going to need, an explosive fill. They're going to need a propelling charge, right, in order to satisfy a European, kind of business plan that they have. And so I think there's opportunities there to leverage, the workforce, to leverage the capacity we've worked really hard to build, as well as keep our supply chains, active and, sustainable going forward.
Sure. Yeah, I think those are all important points, to have some flexibility in manufacturing capacity, especially in different forms of nitrocellulose. There's no reason why you can't have that at a single facility. There at Radford, obviously it's a GOCO, government-owned, contractor-operated facility. Great opportunity to be able to take that footprint, which is, massive, and be able to use that footprint also to be able to store nitrocellulose there. We have a number of facilities there where we can store it safely, get it out of the floodplain there on the New River. So I think those are incredibly important things, as well as looking at others. We talk about modern energetics, and obviously different forms of nitrocellulose are part of that novel energetics realm. But we also have to be able to produce the I call the base chemicals of what we need, and that's things like TNT. And I think having multiple facilities that produce TNT is going to be key, too. I know that you all have opened up a new facility to be able to do some of that, but I think additional capability there is also going to be key. So looking at those things and making sure we're properly capitalizing that, and then get commitments from our allies to where they will, if not buying the munitions from us, at least buy the base components to where we can ensure sustainability. because it's in everybody's interest to make sure that we have that capability. I would argue that those capabilities are the greatest deterrent force that this nation can have. Because if our adversaries know that, you know, we can produce all that we need in order to counter what they're going to do, it'll make them think twice. But if they look at it and they say, wow, guess what? Their production capacity, even if they go to maximum levels, you know, in the next 6 months, is 10 times below theirs, that's a provocation. And we've seen through history. History is a great teacher. You know, provocation in military conflict occurs when there is a disparity in capability between nations. No matter who the nations are, it always, always happens. It's the unfortunate consequence of how human beings operate. So our greatest deterrent is to make sure we have the capability to have somebody wake up every morning as a leader of a foreign nation and say, no, not today, not today. That's how we keep the world safe, and that's how we assure that this nation has what it needs to continue to prosper. So with that, I'm going to go to Mr. Garamendi. I know that he has an additional question.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Very, very important hearing. Thank you so very much for the information that you've provided and for some very important questions that have been raised by my colleagues here. A little quick thing that's been on my mind forever, perhaps because my family's been in the mining business for 100+ years. Doesn't do much good to pull the gold out of the ground unless you're able to actually get it. And excuse me, some people think that this question's not so important. You got to refine it's not enough to mine it, you got to refine it. And that seems to be lost in most of the discussion. Enough of that. I'll be asking questions about refining in a different forum. What I want to get at here is to take your testimony and to bring it down to something that is useful to me and hopefully to the committee here. And that is, okay, you've got $200+ million going into the arsenals. For what and how is it being used and to what effect? In other words, are you successfully carrying out your goal? And what metrics are you used? What is your mechanism of determining how you are doing on that? It follows up on the earlier questions I raised about we really do need to know because we're operating in the dark here. And the light that we get is from you, and not the three of you, but I will tell you over the years I've been shined on with really bright lights that don't give any information. So what I'm looking for is a mechanism to understand what you want to do, then how that fits with our understanding of need, and this energetics issue is certainly a critical one. There are multiple pieces that have been brought to the discussion. How is it? What are you doing? How is it going? What do you need? The need side we work together on. So I really would appreciate it if you could do that, and that involves all of these things. With regard to the vehicles themselves, which brings me down to the rubber on the road, or excuse me, the rubber in the dust and the mud, there's a real problem here. What are you doing specifically to deal with each of the critical? Now, the Humvees may be gone and you don't care much about repairing them. Fine. Tell us, fine, we understand. What's the next vehicle coming in to replace it? So I need to know on the Readiness Subcommittee, down to the, as I say, the mud and the dust and the vehicle. How are you maintaining it? What's happening? What do you need to do more? If it's not priority, fine, tell us why. The other one deals with the, another piece of that, it's becoming extremely expensive to maintain these ground vehicles. The Abrams tank is probably the principal example. What are we going to do about that? Well, you finally found something that'll get me to shut up. Votes. 10 minutes for votes. But I'm looking for a mechanism to really hold to what do you want to do? I know you know what needs to be done. What do you need to do it? How are you going about doing it? What's success? And how do we fit into that? Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Garamendi. Thanks so much for your very important questions about what the path forward is. Thank you for doing that. We appreciate that. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks for your testimony. Thanks for your hard work. We, in the words of the immortal Jerry Reed, we have a long ways to go and a short time to get there. So we want to make sure we're doing that, working with you. Let us know what we can do to help. And with that, this hearing is adjourned.